policy initiative, that is the National Science, Technology and Innovation Policy Draft, which has been put in public domain by the Department of Science and Technology. Now, it is considered to be one of the most significant events amidst many important changes in the past decade that have necessitated the formulation of a new outlook and strategy for science, technology and innovation. So we'll try and understand what are the key focus areas as far as this draft policy is concerned and what necessitated those changes based on which this policy has been brought in public domain. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests, those who have been closely involved with this particular policy and these areas as well. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Professor Ashutosh Sharma is with us as Secretary of the Department of Science and Technology with the Government of India, the department which has put this policy in public domain. We also have with us Professor V. Ramagopal Rao. He is the Director of Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and Dr. Ram Vishwakarma, Advisor with CSIR. Welcome, all of you gentlemen, to Rajya Sabha Television. And let me begin with you, Professor Sharma. Let's start by trying to understand the aim of having such a policy document and the key focus areas when we talk about science, technology and innovation.
Indeed. Let me wish all the viewers a very purposeful and fulfilling new year. And I'm certain that the new science, technology and innovation policy would be a part of it. Now, why do we need a new policy? You see, even 10 years ago, the disruptive challenges of technology of the future, which is coming at us faster and faster, were not clear. So 10 years ago, people would not have paid attention to things like sustainable development and the role of science and technology in it, the rise of intelligent machines, machine learning, Industry 4.0, or Society 5.0, a whole lot of challenges which are based on science and technology, climate change, environment, resources, electric mobility, clean energy, and so on. At the same time, also the whole concept of innovation and startups and their role in building our economy through science and technology also was not very compelling. There were other issues, for example, related to diversity, inclusion, a seamless end-to-end science and technology ecosystem, which is inclusive, which is empowered, which is fully geared to meet our challenges of today and tomorrow, including the Atmanirbhar Bharat. So these were the issues that have become clear. In fact, even COVID-19, the times of COVID-19 within which the entire policy has taken shape, that itself has taught us many lessons, many compelling lessons, which have all been integrated.
Okay.
This policy. So this is basically the background on which we started policy, and basically saying, it's not so much about working in silos, but it's about making connections, whether it is connection between industry, academia, R&D, government, startups, NGOs, the society at large. If you will. So this is where we focus a great deal in this particular policy.
Okay. And then what are the key takeaways here, Professor Sharma, since you're talking about the focus areas and the key takeaways, because some of the points here, talk about one nation, one subscription and few others there as well. But we would love to hear it from you.
Certainly. So, okay, if you mention the one nation, one subscription, that is in fact part of a larger vision. The vision basically is how do we democratize science? In other words, science is not only for scientists. Of course, scientists are the one who create science, but they're also users of science for planning, for development in every line ministry, in the state government, in industry, everywhere. So how do we democratize this information, data, knowledge related to science? Which means we must have access. All our citizens, all our organizations, institutions that work, that have anything to do with science, they must have total access to it. So right now, of course, the subscriptions are very fragmented. Very few people, resources. But it's not only that. You look at all the data and information that is generated with the help of government, which is funded by the government. but the access to this data and information is not there with the ease of access. So all of this must empower our development. We must reach out everybody from Gram Panchayat level to every citizen who would make use of this information and data. So it's about the ease of doing business, it's about access to data and information. And part of that is what you about one nation. We can do a lot better in that particular area.
Okay.
And so, yes.
Okay. We'll come to other specific aspects as well, and there are several takeaways and key focus areas. But let's also hear it from our other two guests. Let me bring in Professor Rao here first. Professor Rao, from your point of view, the need to have a new policy when we talk about science, technology, and innovation, as well as Professor Sharma was pointing out. There is an urgent need, and the COVID pandemic period has also taught us a number of lessons.
Thank you very much. I think, as Professor Sharma mentioned, this is something which is needed now for the current times. But if you see in the country today, there is a lot of science happening, I think, but all of that ends up as research publications. There is a lot of technology also getting generated, but that doesn't feed into innovation. Innovation is something where you apply this technology and produce something that is tangible for the society. So therefore, right now, though there is science happening, there is technology happening, there is innovation happening, but there is no proper flow between all of these different verticals. And that is the biggest challenge. Science ends up as research publications. Technology often is, it comes from somewhere and then we tend to put it together and, it's all low tech. That is what you see mostly, what happens out of the Indian industry or other things, which is coming out of the Indian science. And the innovation also, there is a lot of innovation that is taking place. But again, the deep tech innovation is also missing in the country. And what this policy basically is trying to do is have a more cohesive kind of an approach. And how do you make research eventually lead to innovation? I think that is the transformation, that is what is being attempted. And for that to happen, I think, the unified approach is what is required, which is also what the STI policy is advocating. And I think one of the great things that the policy also talks about is involvement of ministries. I think that is also very important because ministries have lots of problems. They are the ones who deal with multiple issues concerning their ministries, but many of them don't really support institutions for research or innovation because they don't even have a cohesive framework for supporting institutions today. And I think what this policy also talks about is it is now saying that all ministries need to allocate some amount of their money or some amount of their funds for innovation kind of applications, and then they will engage with academia, they will engage with other stakeholders in the whole ecosystem, so that people tend to work on the right kind of problems and then deliver solutions. I think that is what is happening. I think to me the biggest takeaway from this policy is a cohesive framework to science, technology, and innovation, one feeding to the other. I think that is what the most important aspect. I think the policy document is very well framed, and I think the credit should go to Professor Ashutosh Sharma, Department of Science and Technology, and all the stakeholders. It has come out very well.
Okay. A cohesive framework there as far as science and technology is concerned. Let me also bring in Dr. Ram Vishwakarma here. Dr. Vishwakarma, from your point of view, the key takeaways as far as this draft policy is concerned and the aim there to bring in these changes. So how would you look at all these aspects?
So I look at it stepping back from what is happening globally and what India needs to respond. Globally, the expectation of societies and governments have changed. What they expected earlier from science and scientists, I think they have changed. And as you see globally, societies are expecting things which are very different than they were expecting, say, 30 or 40 years. So I think this whole knowledge enterprise has dramatically changed over the last 5 to 10 years globally. And it is not India alone, other countries are going through same phases. So I think it is incumbent on the scientific community, people who administer science, to recognize that change. And I think this policy recognizes that change. For me, that is a big takeaway, that there is a greater recognition of that. We have to change the way do we science, because we have been very privileged in this country for last 70 years that we have been virtually considered as an investment in future, and questions were not asked in terms of the translational outcome, in terms of societal outcome. So I'm very happy to see one point here where it talks about basically the academic impact and societal impact. So I think interplay of this slowly will the greater demand from the stakeholders, taxpayers, governments, I think, and industry also, because industry has to compete globally. And if local science is not able to provide them the basic science, which is globally competitive, our industry will fall behind. So I think these 3 or 4 aspects these are the big takeaway for me, that they have been addressed in this. Now the question will remain that, this policy implementation, we practicing scientists for last 20, 30 years and being director of the laboratory, I realized that these policies implementation, we need different framework also within scientific institution. I think those issues are also being addressed here to create that ecosystem. Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm very pleased to see these things included here. Yeah.
Okay, definitely. Implementation is one very key important area there, and we will come to that part also. But I'll go back to Professor Sharma here. Professor Sharma, in terms of takeaways, while you were earlier pointing out few of them, and both Professor Rao and Dr. Vishwakarma have also, pointed out key significant ones. There are 1 or 2 which I would like your comment upon. One is where it talks about accountable research ecosystem. That's one part, as in the aim there to go ahead and do, achieve what exactly are we trying to achieve there. Second is the STI Development Bank, initiative like this, or a National STI Observatory. So what are these aimed at?
As was pointed out by Professor Ram Gopal Rao and Dr. Ram, you see, it's all about connecting our silos. And I'll come to in a moment, just in 10 seconds, to the question that you were asking. You see, essentially, what we have recognized very clearly, that there are 2 parts of one that creates knowledge and one that consumes knowledge. So oftentimes in the past, we have only been focused on things that create knowledge, but actually our major weakness is not there. And this, in fact, has been shown by COVID-19 time, that our major weakness is not in creation of knowledge. Some of the weaknesses are in terms of the direction and relevance of that knowledge and its consumption, which means its connect with industry, with the government, with the startups. So all of that has to bring in greater focus.
Okay.
Now, the point that you talked about, this is about democratization of knowledge. So the repository that you talked about is about having all that data and information available on one platform, so that everybody can access that. At the same time, all the information which is in terms of patents and publications also must be easily accessible to everybody. But the major idea is indeed related to the fact that we need to bring in more stakeholders very strongly supporting and using science and technology. So who are these stakeholders? See, these are state governments. So typically states tend to ignore the value of science, technology and innovation for them. But they are all now waking up. So they want to partner in a strong way, and they want to solve their local problems using global science.
Okay.
So that is one stakeholder base. With the second one is industry. So industry, of course, while they do R&D on their own, the connection to a whole lot of infrastructure that we have, connection to the knowledge resources that we have, connection to human resources that we have, that has been a little bit weak. So now how do we bring them on board, both in terms of investing in science and technology, but at the same time connecting it with everything else that we have. So we must leverage all of that. So this is done both by fiscal and non-fiscal incentives, but also a public-private partnership roadmap, which means that the nation needs certain technologies and products. And if we can project it to the industry and develop it in co-partnership with them, then their understanding of market becomes clear from the beginning. That together with the procurement policies of the government, which we already know now are undergoing very, major changes.
Okay.
Already undergone major changes. That was a very clear push to our industry to invest in knowledge resources, and they can do that with the government. So they, for example, I would conclude by saying how do you do that? You see all the scientific infrastructure, human resources, everything that we have. Now, industry does not have a very ease of access to these resources. They don't have co-ownership of these resources. So it would be a win-win situation both for academia, R&D labs, and industry to, in fact, have an early direction for the knowledge, which would be consumed. And so there are, many ideas and aspects related. Now, this is about national priorities. It's about Atmanirbhar Bharat, which again has become something which is very clear. Now, look, Professor Ram Gopal Rao, CSIR, everybody knows that we could have made ventilators, we could have made the top of the class diagnostics, we could have made everything even 5-10 years ago, but we did not. Okay, the reason we did not, and we could do it in the 4 months COVID-19 period, the top of the line diagnostics coming from CSIR, for example, CRISPR-based diagnostics, latest, cutting edge, right? And all of this happened. Why? It happened because there was a common purpose. There was an early direction. There was a co-ownership of everything that was being done by the society at large. So if we bring in the same energy and vision and energy into this, I have no doubt that everything that the nation needs, that we are totally dependent on, for example, for imports and so on, that can start developing at a speed and scale, starting now. And within 10 years, we should be, our vision of the policy is in this decade, we should be within the top 3 countries in the world in terms of everything we do in science, technology, and innovation. Not just in terms of number of papers. Number of papers, we already 3 or 4 in the world, which simply means that we can produce knowledge. We can produce world-class knowledge. So now, obviously, the weakness is that how to use this knowledge.
Okay.
And so this is what the policy is about.
Okay, indeed, it is all about, putting the knowledge back to work in terms of the need where it is required, and a cohesive approach, as Professor Sharma is pointing out, co-ownership there as well. That brings me to both Professor Rao and Dr. Vishwakarma again. Professor Rao, I'll start with you in terms of the implementation aspect, since you're head of an institution there which develops or rather produces not only technologies but also human resources who as scientists can work upon those particular ideas and can bring forth more interesting views as well. So policies like these, when put into implementation mode, how best to do it?
It's a good, important point. I should mention, I think it has to be a bottom-up versus top-down kind of an approach. It's not actually versus each other. It's a combination of top-down and bottom-up kind of an approach, which is the need of the hour right now. I will give you an example. If you look at ISRO, right? Why do we consider ISRO as a successful organization in this country? There are so many labs. They have a huge number of laboratories. But at the end of the day, all of their output must go towards flying a satellite. I think there is a very focused objective. You do whatever you want in these laboratories. At the end of the day, if ISRO is not able to fly those satellites, we would, not consider ISRO as successful.
Common purpose.
That's the reason why that common mission mode kind of an approach is where, ISRO is seen as a very successful organization. You look at any agency in the country, wherever a mission is set, wherever common goals are set, India has done very well. Whether it is DRDO, whether it is ISRO, whether it is DAE, all of these organizations have done very well because it is a bottom-up plus a top-down kind of an approach. In academia, that is something that is lacking right now. Everything is left to the researchers to decide. The problems they decide, the approach they decide, what they want to do with the research they decide. Everything is left to these researchers. As a result, there is a lot of research happening, but all of that is not adding up to something which you can show as a tangible output, like what ISRO is able to demonstrate. I will like what Professor Sharma is mentioning, the COVID time. At IIT Delhi, we said that during the COVID time, we all will focus as an institution on just the COVID, because there was nothing else that made sense to, undertake as a research in these times. Once an institution now put the focus on COVID, finding solutions to the COVID problem, in about, like what Professor Sharma mentioned, in 5 to 6 months time, we had the world's cheapest RT-PCR kit. We supplied 5 million PPEs now at the most affordable kind of a price. Almost 40% of them are getting exported. And then we were able to study the medicines, in a scientific way, the traditional medicines in a scientific way, publish papers in the world's top journals, which are also now, as an information which is available for the people. As you can see, one single institute having focus as COVID, people coming together as a multidisciplinary kind of teams, I think, able to deliver so much in a matter of 6 months kind of a time. I think that is what is needed to be done during the normal times too. In the normal times, if there is that urgency built, if there is that focus that is brought to our institutions with the kind of support that has happened, during this COVID time, even the approval processes in the government, all got streamlined in a matter of months because there was that urgency. As a result, all of our institutions were able to deliver so much in such a short period of time. I think, this is the lesson to learn from the COVID. And I think this is what that must apply even during the normal times. If we are able to do that, there is so much of potential in our academia. I think if we can tap even a small percentage of it, India will be a developed country pretty soon.
Okay, indeed, there is no dearth of potential and knowledge as far as India is concerned. That brings me to Dr. Vishwakarma for the concluding comments. Dr. Vishwakarma, from your perspective, you earlier spoke about also the implementation part. So what's the best way to move forward? Because if you look at the policy document, it indeed looks like a landmark one.
Yeah, so I'm sure when a policy like this has been set up, and I'm sure lot of sort of discourse has gone behind it. So if policy has been set up, I'm sure the pathway to implement it, and I think we all know how to implement it. It's not that something that we have to reinvent. That knowledge is there. In fact, we have to just come out of that comfort zone, like moving from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. And I think India has to graduate to occupy the kind of space like India in basic sciences sit on the global high table today. This was not envisaged 30 years ago. We did that, and we decided to do that. Now, if we decide to do that in the translational domain, translation of our knowledge, which we create, other people leverage that knowledge. I think we have to also leverage part of that knowledge. And I must point out here, which is the disconnect in India. I think this policy is looking at it, and I request Dr. Sharma to look at this, that, the R&D that happens in our national laboratories and universities and IITs, and R&D that happen in Indian R&D companies, Indian companies, there is a significant overlap. According to me, in a very advanced science-driven economy, the R&D that happen in public system, which should be the one which industry should be doing 20 years from now. So I think that connect and strategy to decide that how do we divide what my R&D company, pharma company in Bombay should not be doing what I've been doing in CSIR. I should be creating that knowledge and moving into areas where actually we have opportunity to become global leader, areas of materials, the biological revolution that is right now happening globally, I think going to change the face of medicine and everything else that is happening in, for example, regenerative medicine, translational medicine that is happening. So I think this policy document, I was reading it, and I got nice to see that many times I could see this component of synergy, translation. And I think if a discussion that happens with industry, and we can divide the domain, and it cannot be watertight, obviously, but there is a proactive approach which department can take, ministry can take to support funding. And I also want to say before I conclude that time has come when the taxpayer funding should also go to private R&D. It's ultimately the science that thrives there, science thrives there. I think this notion we have to shed now in this nation. Like, look at the COVID time, how much United States government has funded through BARDA program. Most of the, Moderna vaccine is $900 million funded by US government. And I think that across scientists in private industry or scientists in IIT or CSR, DST lab, After all, he is a scientist, and we should support scientists to do innovation. I see this policy is hinting toward that, and I think hopefully we are moving in that direction.
Okay, definitely. Those are very, very important, significant suggestions, Dr. Vishwakarma. Thank you so much there, and Professor Ashutosh Sharma as well.